The brush moves slowly, as if afraid of what it might find. A hand-gloved, careful sweeps dust from carved stone. The granules fall away in silence. The only sounds are breath and the soft scrape of bristles against millennia. And beneath the dust, a face emerges, a royal guard, a tribute bearer, the unmistakable profile of a kingdom that the Hebrew Bible names as an enemy, condemned in prophecy, remembered as a betrayer. This is Busayra, ancient Bozrah, the royal fortress city of Edom. The wind moves through empty doorways now. The rooms where kings once received ambassadors from Assyria and Babylon hold only shadows and the occasional call of a bird nesting in broken archways. But the stone remembers. And for the last 50 years, archaeologists have been learning to read what the stone preserved. Here is what they found. A kingdom with monumental architecture, carved from Jordanian mountains' walls, so precisely fitted that later builders assumed the Romans had constructed them. A civilization that controlled the richest copper mines in the southern Levant, producing more than 100,000 tons of smelting slag, enough metal to arm cities across 3 continents. A people mentioned more than 100 times in the Hebrew Bible, from Genesis to Obadiah to the Psalms, from the story of Jacob and Esau to the lamentations of exiles who never forgot what Edom did. And yet, the Edom the Bible describes the Edom that refused Moses' passage through its territory, the Edom that rejoiced when Jerusalem fell, the Edom that became a synonym for divine judgment is not the only Edom the ground has kept. Because before the enmity, there was copper. Before the betrayal, there was trade. Before the book of Obadiah pronounced judgment, there were 2 kingdoms, Edom and Judah, bound together by a resource. Neither could afford to lose, and a geography neither could escape. Why did the Hebrew Bible remember Edom as an enemy, when archaeology shows that Edom and Judah were once partners, trading copper for survival? That question will follow you through this entire episode. It will sit in the back of your mind during every historical detail, every biblical quote, every description of fortress walls and mining pits. Because the answer changes how you hear every biblical reference to Edom from this moment forward. The brush keeps moving. Let us follow where it leads. The Kingdom of Edom occupied one of the most unforgiving landscapes in the ancient Near East. South of the Dead Sea, east of the Arabah Valley, the mountains of modern Jordan rise in terraces of sandstone and limestone. Rainfall is scarce less than 200 millimeters annually in most areas. Summer heat bakes the ground until it cracks. Winter flash floods scour the canyons. By any measure, this should have been a region of small villages and herding camps, not a centralized kingdom with fortresses and industrial infrastructure. But beneath the surface lay something that changed everything. Copper. The Arabah Valley contains some of the most accessible copper ore in the ancient world, ore so pure that it could be smelted with technologies available in the Bronze Age. And in the Iron Age, copper was not merely a commodity. It was the metal of weapons, tools, ritual objects, and trade goods. Control copper, and you controlled the supply chain upon which empires depended. Lose copper, and your army fought with stone. Historical records suggest that Edomite state formation accelerated dramatically between the 10th and 8th centuries BCE. Archaeological surveys have identified more than 300 Iron Age sites across southern Jordan, not scattered farmsteads but fortified settlements, administrative centres with stamped jar handles, and industrial processing facilities with slag heaps that still poison the soil today. At the heart of this emerging kingdom stood Busayra biblical Bozrah. The site commands a ridge overlooking agricultural plains and trade routes running from Arabia to the Mediterranean. Excavations, led by archaeologists from the University of Jordan and the British Institute, have revealed a monumental gateway. Casemate walls 12 feet thick, a palace complex with painted plaster walls, and storage facilities capable of holding grain and oil for thousands of people through a siege. Scholars believe this was Edom's royal capital, the seat of kings whose names appear in Assyrian tribute lists alongside the kings of Israel and Judah. The Bible remembers Edom primarily through the figure of Esau, Jacob's brother, the hunter who sold his birthright for a bowl of red stew. Genesis describes Esau as the father of the Edomites, his descendants settling in the hill country of Seir, which biblical geography locates squarely in the territory archaeologists now call Edom. The name Edom itself means red in Hebrew, a likely reference to the red sandstone of the region, or to the red stew for which Esau traded his inheritance, or to the red skin of the Edomites themselves, according to later tradition, language, geology, and memory intertwine. By the time the kings of Israel and Judah appear in the biblical narrative, Edom is already present as a neighbor. The Book of Numbers records that the Edomites refused Moses' permission to cross their territory during the Exodus, forcing the Israelites to make a long detour. King David, according to 2 Samuel, conquered Edom and stationed garrisons throughout its territory. King Solomon, according to 1 Kings, operated a fleet of ships from the Red Sea port of Ezion-Geber, a port located in what had been Edomite territory. Sometimes adversary, sometimes subject, sometimes ally. Always there, a permanent fact of the political landscape. Outside the Bible, the evidence is just as clear. Assyrian royal inscriptions from the 8th and 7th centuries BCE list Edom among the kingdoms of the West that paid tribute to emperors like Tiglath-Pileser III and Sennacherib. One inscription from the palace of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal names the Edomite king Qos-malaku alongside the kings of Ammon, Moab, and Judah, all prostrating before the same throne. Edom appears not as a marginal band of raiders, but as a state recognized by the most powerful empire of its age, with named rulers, defined borders, and a capital city. So here is what the viewer needs to carry forward into the rest of this episode. Edom was real, it was fortified, it was copper-rich, it had kings, scribes, engineers, and priests. And for more than 3 centuries, it lived beside Judah, in a relationship that biblical writers experienced as complicated, not simply hostile, not simply friendly, but real in all the messy ways that ancient neighbors were real. The question is not whether Edom existed. The question is what happened to turn a trading partner into a biblical symbol of betrayal. That answer requires a closer look at the copper itself and at the industrial scale of Edomite mining that archaeologists have only recently begun to understand. The site is called Khirbat en-Nahas, Arabic for ruins of copper. The name tells you everything you need to know. Located in the lowlands of the Araba Valley, approximately 50 kilometers south of the Dead Sea, this sprawling industrial complex contains slag heaps so massive they can be seen from satellite imagery. Thousands of tons of copper processing waste, smelting furnaces with surviving tuyères, the ceramic pipes that channeled air into the fire, mine shafts descending into the earth, administrative buildings with seals and inscriptions, workers' quarters with grinding stones for preparing ore. Radiocarbon dating has placed the peak of industrial activity at Khirbat en-Nahas between the 10th and 9th centuries BCE, the same centuries the Hebrew Bible associates with the united monarchy of David and Solomon. This chronological overlap is not accidental. The evidence indicates, though cannot confirm, that Edomite copper production at this scale required specialized labor, centralized administration, and long-distance trade networks. This was not family-operated mining. This was state-level industry, the kind of operation that required a kingdom to organize, protect, and distribute. And here is where the story of Edom and Judah intersects in ways the Bible never explicitly records. Copper was abundant in Edom. The Araba Valley contained millions of tons of ore, some of it so rich that it could be smelted directly without beneficiation. But the Edomite highlands were poor in grain and timber, the basic resources required to feed a population and build fortresses. The mountains of Edom rise steeply from the valley floor, leaving little arable land. Trees are sparse. Springs are unreliable. Judah, by contrast, controlled agricultural land in the Shephelah and the Jerusalem hills, fertile terrain watered by winter rains and perennial springs. Judah also controlled trade routes to Phoenicia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean coast. What Judah lacked was copper. The hills around Jerusalem contained no significant metal deposits. Judahite weapons, tools, and ritual objects had to be imported or traded. Scholars believe that a natural partnership emerged. Copper from Edom flowed north into Judah, probably along the King's Highway, the ancient trade route that ran from the Gulf of Aqaba through Edom, Moab, Ammon, and into Syria. Grain, oil, timber, and finished goods flowed south into Edom. The relationship was not friendship. In the modern sense, ancient states did not operate on sentiment, but it was interdependence. Two kingdoms whose survival required the other's surplus. Then the empires arrived. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, under kings like Tiglath-Pileser III, who reigned from 745 to 727 BCE, and Sennacherib, who reigned from 705 to 681 BCE, transformed the political landscape of the entire Near East. The Assyrian army was the most efficient fighting force the world had yet seen, professional, iron-armed, and utterly ruthless. No kingdom could remain independent. The choice was submission or annihilation. Edom submitted, Judah submitted, Ammon and Moab submitted as well. Assyrian texts record the tribute paid by these kingdoms: metals, livestock, agricultural products, and labor. One inscription from the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III lists Qos-malaku of Edom alongside Ahaz of Judah, both paying gold, silver, lead, iron, and copper. Edom's copper, the very resource that had made it powerful, now flowed not to Judah, but to Nineveh, the Assyrian capital. Judah's grain and oil followed the same path. The partnership between Edom and Judah did not collapse because either kingdom chose to end it. It collapsed because both were now vassals of a power that demanded everything and gave back only the permission to exist. Trade between vassals was not forbidden, but it was constrained. Surpluses went to the imperial center first. What remained for neighbors was whatever the empire did not take. When Assyria fell to the Neo-Babylonian Empire in the late 7th century BCE, a collapse that took less than a decade, the pressure did not ease. It intensified. Babylon was more centralized, more demanding, and less tolerant of local autonomy than Assyria had been. Where Assyria had ruled through local kings who maintained some independence, Babylon annexed territories directly and appointed governors accountable to the throne. And then came 586 BCE. The Babylonian army, under Nebuchadnezzar II, breached the walls of Jerusalem after a siege that lasted nearly 2 years. The city starved. The prophet Jeremiah, who witnessed the siege, describes mothers eating their own children. The Temple of Solomon, the center of Judah's worship, identity, and national hope, was burned to the ground. The king's sons were executed before his eyes. His own eyes were then gouged out. The population was exiled to Babylon. The Hebrew Bible preserves the sound of that catastrophe in book after book. Lamentations weeps over the ruined city. How lonely sits the city that once was full of people. The Psalms cry out for justice. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock. And Obadiah, the shortest book in the Hebrew Scriptures, just 21 verses, directs a specific, searing prophecy against Edom. For violence against your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. On the day you stood aside, on the day strangers carried off his wealth, you were like one of them. The accusation is clear. When Judah fell, Edom did not help. According to the biblical witness, Edom blocked escape routes, handed over survivors to Babylonian patrols, looted Judahite villages while the army was occupied elsewhere, exploited the catastrophe for its own gain. Psalm 137, composed in the anguish of exile beside the rivers of Babylon, remembers Edom with words that still unsettle readers. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, when they said, tear it down to its very foundations. Here is the tension at the heart of this episode. Archaeology has found no Edomite inscription that says we betrayed Judah. No smoking gun, no direct confession. The Edomites left behind no history of their own, only potsherds, slag heaps, and fortress walls. But archaeology has found something else, something that may matter more. Edom's fortress walls were strengthened in the late 7th and early 6th centuries BCE, precisely the decades when Judah was being destroyed by Babylon. New fortifications were built at Busayra and at smaller sites throughout Edomite territory. Copper production continued at Khirbat en-Nahas, though at reduced scale. Administrative systems expanded, not contracted, with new seal impressions and storage jars appearing in the archaeological record. The evidence suggests that Edom made a choice, not a choice between helping Judah and remaining neutral, a choice between survival and annihilation. Babylon was watching. The same intelligence network that had identified Jerusalem as a threat was active in Edom. If Edom had opened its borders to Judahite refugees, if Edom had provided food, shelter, or military aid, Babylon would have done to Bozrah what it had done to Jerusalem. The walls would have fallen. The palace would have burned. The king would have been blinded or impaled. And everyone in the ancient Near East knew it. The biblical writers were not historians in the modern sense. They were theologians, poets, and survivors. They wrote from inside the trauma of exile, with the smoke of Jerusalem still in their lungs and the taste of ash still on their tongues. Their Edom is a real political entity, yes, but it is also a symbol, a name for the neighbor who watched and did nothing, the relative who turned away, the friend who chose safety over solidarity. The archaeology does not deny the pain of that memory. The archaeology explains why the memory took the shape it did. The hook we planted in the first minutes of this episode now receives its answer. Why did the Hebrew Bible remember Edom as an enemy when archaeology shows that Edom and Judah were once partners, trading copper for survival? Because empires broke what neither kingdom could protect. The partnership was real. The copper trade was real. The interdependence was real. Archaeologists have traced Edomite-style pottery throughout Judahite sites of the 9th and 8th centuries. Judahite grain storage techniques appear in Edomite fortresses. The two kingdoms shared not only resources, but technologies, craftspeople, and probably marriages between their royal families. But interdependence offers no protection against an empire that demands total submission. When Assyria and Babylon reshaped the political map of the ancient Near East, every local relationship was renegotiated under the shadow of annihilation. The question was never what is right, but what is survivable. Edom did not betray Judah because Edom was evil. The Bible never says Edom was evil. It says Edom was judged for a specific action or inaction on a specific day. Edom did not help Judah because helping would have meant extinction. And the Edomite kings knew it. The Judahite survivors knew it too, even if they could not forgive it. The Bible remembers the betrayal because betrayal is what the survivors felt, and their pain is real. Scripture does not lie about pain. Scripture is not a sanitized history written by winners. It is a raw, bleeding document of memory, faith, and trauma, composed by people whose world had been burned to ashes. But Scripture is not a modern historical archive. It does not include satellite imagery of slag heaps. It does not include Assyrian tribute lists. It does not include radiocarbon dates from copper mines. The biblical writers wrote with the tools they had: memory, poetry, prophecy, and they used those tools to make sense of catastrophe. The Edom of Obadiah and Psalm 137 is the Edom of a single terrible moment, the moment Jerusalem burned and the neighbor did nothing. That Edom is real, that moment happened. But archaeology allows us to see what the survivors could not see. The copper mines of Khirbat en-Nahas, operating for centuries before Jerusalem fell. The fortress walls of Busayra, built not to threaten Judah, but to resist Egypt and Assyria. The administrative texts listing Edomite kings alongside Judahite kings in Assyrian tribute records two names on the same list of the conquered, two vassals serving the same master, two peoples caught in the same machine. The partnership did not end because Edom chose enmity. It ended because empires turn neighbors into enemies. This is not an excuse. Let that be clear. This is not an apology for Edom. The biblical witness stands. The survivor's pain stands. Judgment belongs to God, not to historical explanation. But this is an explanation. And for viewers who read the Bible as sacred history, who believe that every name in Scripture belonged to real people made in the image of God, this explanation matters. Because it allows us to see Edom not as a cartoon villain, but as a real kingdom with real fears, real constraints, and real leaders making impossible choices under impossible pressure. The turn is complete. The hook is resolved. The viewer now carries a question transformed into understanding. The brush sweeps one last time. The carved face on the stone at Busayra, the royal guard, the tribute bearer, the anonymous craftsman's hand captured in sandstone stairs, out from a wall that has not seen a living king in 2,500 years. The wind still moves through empty doorways. The sun still bakes the Jordanian mountains. The rooms where kings once received ambassadors from Assyria and Babylon hold only shadows, but the stones have spoken. Edom was not a phantom, not a mere symbol, not a cardboard villain placed in Scripture to make Israel look righteous by comparison. Edom was a kingdom, fortified, copper-rich, strategically vital, and caught like Judah, like Ammon, like Moab, like every small state in the path of empires between forces that tolerated no rivals. The Bible's memory of Edom is real. The pain is real. The accusation in Obadiah is real. The cry of Psalm 137 is real. Scripture does not ask us to pretend otherwise. But the Bible does not contain everything the ground has kept. The ground keeps what empires bury and what time forgets. Archaeology is not a correction to Scripture, it is an expansion, a deeper context. A reminder that every name in the biblical text, every nation, every king, every enemy, every ally belonged to real people. People who lived, who ate, who worked, who feared, who hoped, who failed, who died under the same sky that shelters us. After watching this episode, you have been invited to feel the quiet dignity of a kingdom erased from popular memory, and to understand that the Bible's portrayal of Edom as an enemy reflects not ancient hatred, but the tragic pressure of imperial conquest on two neighbors. The forgotten kingdom is no longer forgotten, not because we have excused what Edom did, not because we have erased the biblical witness, but because we have finally seen Edom clearly as a people, not a symbol, as a kingdom, not a slur, as neighbors, not enemies. And maybe, just maybe, that changes how you hear its name when you read. Remember the Edomites, the psalmist wrote from exile. But now you remember differently, not as symbols, as people, as copper miners and fortress builders, as kings who paid tribute to the same empires that destroyed their partners, as survivors who made the wrong choice, or the only choice depending on which side of the wall you stood. The brush rests now, the dust settles, the face on the stone returns to shadow, but you carry something out of this place. Not anger, not judgment, not easy answers, understanding. And sometimes, for readers of sacred history, understanding is the beginning of mercy. From the mountains of Jordan, this has been Faith Burst.